So when I talk about attention now, attention is a vital mechanism through which a student can actively select particular aspects of his or her environment for further learning. How does this happen, and why is attention such an important aspect of learning?
Well, emotion drives attention, and attention drives learning. It's very difficult to learn something if you don't focus on it. Now, sometimes things do slip in without our knowing it into long-term memory. Have you ever played Trivial Pursuit?
Yes.
And have you ever given an answer and the person said, how'd you know that? You said, I don't know. It was just in there.
Yes.
You don't know how it got in there. So that happens occasionally. Things slip in. You never really focused on it. They slipped in. Sometimes it's a song that stays with you or lyrics that stay with you or something. But it's filed in a very separate place. And you have to have a very specific question like Trivial Pursuit to yank it out of memory. Oh, there it is. And you're surprised as much as the person who asked the question about where it came from. So those things happen, but it's very rare and very little. In order to really learn something well, you have to focus on it. And the brain is very good at that. The brain is very good at focusing because remember, its job is to keep you alive. So when something gets its attention, it focuses, but then it makes an immediate decision. Do I maintain focus or not? And what's happening is kids are learning not to retain focus for very long. Why? Because of this. Have you heard of the 8-second rule?
Yes.
Studies have shown us that kids between the ages of 6 and 18 will make a decision as to whether to focus on something within 8 to 12 seconds.
Okay.
A little longer for the younger kids, a lot shorter for the older kids. That's called the 8-second rule. If you don't get their attention and maintain it for 8 seconds,
okay,
it's going to drift. It's going to drift somewhere else. And where's it going to drift? If they've got this in their lap, it's going to drift there, or to something else, or to a conversation with their neighbor. So it's very important then that we understand how critical focus is to learning, attention is to learning, and how important it is to get it. Now we're back to novelty. See how it goes in a circle?
Yes, it's a vicious circle. Yes,
is a great way to get attention.
Mm-hmm.
When you do something different, then you've got their attention, and that's the start. It's a big start, and you've got to try to remember to hold it for a while so they really get into things. Now, one way to do that, because you're probably going to ask me about some strategies for this. One way to do that is to shift the burden now to the students, to get their mind engaged in the learning instead of you getting engaged in it. You shift the workload to the brain, because the brain that does the work is the brain that learns. So attention is very critical. Attention is also necessary to do the things we said earlier. Find sense and attach meaning. When those two things are present, the chances that information will be sent to long-term storage is high. And by the way, when does that storage occur? When is information transferred from temporary memory to long-term memory? When we sleep.
Yes, at night. The brain keeps going. Yes.
Yeah, during what we call rapid eye movement, REM sleep.
Yes.
That's when the brain starts encoding what is in working memory into long-term memory, or getting rid of what's in working memory that you have not attached. Let's save this message on. That's why it's important to get enough sleep too. Kids are not getting enough sleep. Why not getting enough sleep? Once again, this. They go to their bedrooms, they take this with them, and they start chatting with their friends.
Yes.
And they go to bed, they go to sleep at 1 o'clock, and they have to get up at 7. So they get 6 hours of sleep instead of 8 or 9, which is important in order to get all the REM cycles in. So that can be a vicious cycle. Sleep deprivation is a big problem in American schools and Canadian schools. So
I think it's on an international basis, I think.
It can be, especially in those areas where there's so much stuff in the curriculum to cover, and they don't care whether the kids are asleep or not. They just cover. You know, a teacher's job is not to cover the curriculum; it's to uncover it.
Yes. Can you name a few strategies? You mentioned a few you recommend to educators in order to teach the whole brain.
Well, you know, we had talked earlier about school change. And I want to mention something about that because I think teachers waste a lot of time on things they can't change. I don't know if you've ever heard of the Serenity Prayer. The Serenity Prayer is the one that says, let me recognize those things I can't change.
Yes, yes.
Give me the courage to do the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference between the two.
Yes.
And very often I talk to teachers and they say, well, you know, the school board did this and the state did that and the ministry did this. And, you know, what can we do about it? The answer is probably nothing. Don't waste your time yelling at and getting upset at things you can't change. Concentrate on the things you can change. And the things you can change are what you do in the classroom. The strategies that you select to increase the probability that learning will occur, that's still under your command. Remember, the purpose of schools and schoolings is to help kids learn. And that has to be the primary focus. And if you in your classroom, that's what you do. You are essentially doing the essence of what schooling is all about. And don't worry about the politicians. Don't worry about this. Unless it directly affects you, then maybe you can, your association or your union can do something about it. But concentrate, spend your time on what strategies I can use in the classroom to increase learning. And there are a couple of them. I mean, there are many of them. And I get the practitioner's corners in my book show you many different strategies. But let me just mention a couple of them. I mentioned one of them already, teaming, academic teaming. We've now had quite a bit of research in the last 3 or 4 years about that, how powerful academic teams are. It's like cooperative learning, but more intensive. It's putting kids in small groups, 3, 4, no more than 5, and giving them a piece of the learning assignment and having them talk it out. Give them enough information to move toward the problem, but let their own brain solve the problem. That has become we use it, and we start with that in kindergarten, believe it or not. And it's amazing when kids start talking to each other instead of just sitting listening to the teacher, what comes out of those brains. A lot of it can, what we call synergy.
Okay.
Synergy is when the whole is greater than the sum of its parts.
Yes.
You know, that's one thing. So look that up. Another one, especially in secondary schools, is getting kids up and moving around the classroom. Getting up, because when you sit for more than 30 minutes, your blood pools. It pools in your feet and in your seat. And blood that's pooled there isn't doing your brain any good. The brain is very effective, but it's not efficient. It uses a lot of energy. It burns about 25% of your calories up here, believe it or not. So you got to feed it. You got to feed it oxygen and sugar. And when you sit too long, the blood, you're not getting as much blood to the brain. So you want to get them up and move. When you move, your calf muscles squeeze, they break up those pools, you get more blood across the brain. Also, when you move, you open up long-term storage sites. And so when you get them up to move, you also ask them to partner off with somebody and talk to that partner about what you're learning. And when you talk to your partner about what you're learning and you're opening long-term storage sites, you're more likely to connect the new learning to things you already know. Wow, transfer. So that's a very powerful strategy, just getting kids up moving around. Now, sometimes secondary teachers say, well, I'm afraid if I get them moving around, there'll be chaos in the classroom. Not if you get a good assignment, not if you get a good lesson plan, not if you give them an assignment for which they're held accountable. Then they're more likely to do what you ask them to do. Kids get off task when they see no meaning in what they're doing. If they see meaning in what they're doing, they stay on task because they think it's going to benefit them. And kids are selfish like everybody else. They want to do things that they think will benefit them. Another one is try to find ways to connect what you're teaching to the real world. Because too often kids say, I don't understand why I have to know this. So whenever you can connect what you're teaching to the real world they'll face when they get out there, or when they go to their next grade, or when they go to the next school, whatever connection you can make to their real world, then you reduce the kids saying, why do I have to know this? And also it gives more meaning and understanding to why they're learning something. And another one, and very important one, is this one: beware of technology. The overuse of technology is causing big problems in schools. Use it cautiously. It should be a tool, not an end unto itself. What we're finding is that when kids rely too much on these things, it's affecting their thinking skills, it's affecting their memory, it's affecting their focus, and it's affecting their social skills. And all of those not in a good way. So when you put kids in those groups and say, see if we can find another way to solve this problem, when you and I were told to do that, we would sit and talk to our partners and say, okay, what can we do? What do we already know that can help us here? And you start exchanging ideas. Now what they do is they, just a minute, let's see what Google says. And they go and find out how somebody else solved the problem. And then they say, we found it. So what's happening is this is becoming their higher order thinking skills, not their own brain. So they're not practicing higher order thinking skills. So it's very important to limit the use of technology in the classroom. Memory too. Ask people today, what's your home phone number?
They won't tell you. They won't tell you. Yes, they won't tell you.
No, we used to know it. Now this knows it. So we're transferring more and more of our memory here, which means our memory isn't getting the practice it's supposed to be getting. You know, we've got very good memory systems, but you got to use them. Use them or lose it. You know, use it or lose it.
Use it or, yeah, that's it. Use it or lose it.
And think about social skills. You know, when you're face to face to a person, talking to them, having conversation, that's a very different social interaction than if you're talking to them through this. Because when I talk to you face to face, I have a set of neurons in my brain called mirror neurons. They're also called the empathy neurons. They look at you and see how you're reacting. Because remember, about 70% of communication is nonverbal. It's your body language, it's your eyes, it's your facial expressions.
Facial expressions is right.
It's how you move, whether you come closer to me or back off, how you hold your hands. All these signals my brain picks up. So if I'm talking to you, Erica, and I say something that unintentionally offends you, your facial expression will change. Not from a smile, but maybe questionable or anger. My empathy neurons, pick that up and say, David, what did you just do here? Something happened, you better correct that. And so I try to make amends and correct it. And there are things I would never say to your face, but I would say them here because I don't know how you react at the other end. I can't see your reaction. I don't know what words you're going to use. And when you send me a text message back, I don't know what's under that text. I don't know the feeling.
And the tone that it's being written.
Exactly, all those things that are so critical. So what's happening because of this technology is that kids are learning that relationships, social relationships, are centered around a device rather than centered around people. And that's not good. So for those teachers who are relying too heavily on technology, beware. It can be extremely useful. It can be extremely valuable in certain circumstances, but don't use it to replace memory, to replace thinking skills, to replace social skills, and to replace attention, because you're doing a disservice to the human brain, not being helpful to it. Well, I hope that's been helpful.
Yes, very, very helpful. It was very interesting. Thank you so much for discussing these questions. And It was very insightful too. Thank you very much.